And just before we start, I wanted to say, I have to jump off on the full hour today, unfortunately.
Okay, we'll try and keep it short. I'm just going to do a screen share for part of this meeting, and then when it gets more discursive, I'll stop a screen share so we can see each other's faces. But there are some kind of administrative stuff that we do at the beginning, so I thought it might be best just to do it that way. Okay, so can you see that?
Yes.
Okay. So welcome everyone to the second meeting of Community Governance Oversight, and if we can just get straight in on updates from Treasury. Andre or Miroslav, if you want to address any of these points and give a quick summary.
Okay, so we did payments for the first 3 meetings. I just want to make sure I see there's budget items, there's funds allocated for the surveys, retros, and the reports. So I think for the last 3 meetings, we'll pay that at the very end. And then as IOG releases the other funds, we can pay for these surveys immediately. I think that would be the best way to take that. And also if are these numbers fixed? 6 surveys, I suppose if we're going to do more, if you're going to do more surveys, then we just divide that number.
I think it's going to depend on how we frame our deliverables, Andre, so it's going to be quite flexible. So we'll do that at each meeting and then report back on what should be charged.
Okay. I think that's it. Yeah, the proposal is already paid. The preparation of the fund aid proposal we already paid.
Oh, sorry,
As
I
well.
just got a message from Phil there. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, so the preparation.
Yeah, Phil's in another meeting.
Yeah, sorry, I forgot about Phil. I've just admitted him. Okay. Sorry, Andre got distracted by that. So the charge the charge against the preparation for the Fund 8 proposal budget, yeah.
Yes, yeah, that's paid. That's paid. Made that payment.
When
Okay.
when was that payment made?
Just earlier this week. Let me check.
I think it was yesterday. Miroslav said, I think. This is for.
Yeah, we left a message in the Discord. Yes, yeah.
So that was
yesterday.
for well, helping with the draft of the Fund 8 proposal. Obviously, I think it's $100 each. So, is there any questions or issues relating to Treasury or anything else you want to raise? No, I'll move on then to town hall slides. Oh, sorry, go on.
Does anyone else have questions for us?
No, I'm sure we will in future.
Yeah.
Okay, but if we just move on, town hall slides. Allison, do you want to give an update on town hall slides?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure what to say other than I presented them. If anyone has any feedback for me, things to do differently or comments on what I said, I'm all ears. Otherwise, I don't have any other updates.
Yeah, I think it was
awesome,
a good.
Allison, just awesome.
Oh,
I did good. Well done.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. I was not fishing for compliments.
Yeah, I thought it was a good job. I thought it was great to start with the volunteer principles and reiterate those. And then on the other slides, doing a kind of update. I think that was really maybe a good way to go.
Thank you.
Yeah. But there's enough.
And thank you for putting them together. And is Andre still here? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
sorry, just jumping back. I love what you did with the metadata. That's what I was looking for with the payment. That is fantastic.
Yes, yes.
That's
yes.
really
Okay,
cool.
cool.
Thank you.
Cool.
Pleasure.
Okay, let's move on to, we submitted a, well, obviously we submitted a Fund 8 proposal. There's a link to the proposal there if you want to, if everyone here would like to promote that or talk about that when it's appropriate, so we can get funded, so we can do this continue after May. It's for slightly more. There's, I think it's about $30,000, above $30,000. I think 10,000 of it is going to research this time with Kenrick involvement as well, and more money for deliverables. But of course, like this proposal, it will be flexible. Okay, moving on to the main section of the meeting. Sorry, if there's any questions about the proposal, sorry, first of all, the Fund 8 proposal, if we...
I'll lump this into the Fund 8 proposal section, but I'm also trying hard to recruit a secretary who would volunteer to do the secretarial roles. So I'm hopefully talking to someone next week. I made the call out last night in the town hall, but if anyone else knows anybody, feel free to, I don't know, I'm happy to interview them and decide, or we can come up with some kind of process, but for ease of process and not taking up too much time, if everyone trusts me, I'm happy to just manage that. Saying that really to be sensitive to people's time. If anybody else wants to be involved, certainly we can do that.
Yeah, that's good with me as well. Be helpful. Okay, if I move on to the main area of what I've done here, following on from our previous meeting, was to take each area that we are addressing, and they are, they are challenge settings, catalyst circle problem sensing, DREPs, and governance parameters. And I've merged both of these together, so we kind of know what the scopes are. That's our scoping areas. So what I thought we could go through each one and just look at what deliverables we have and look where we are with each one of those. So, I mean, I can, because this is a bit more discursive, we have 25 minutes for the whole section. I'm going to take this off screen share to give us more opportunity to discuss this between ourselves. So, and I'll just go through, and if you can refer to the agenda yourself. But if we start with challenge settings, and here, really, we don't have any ownership of this at the moment or any deliverable. Is there anyone interested in addressing this governance process area, or in doing any surveys, retrospectives, or reports in this area?
Sorry, I was distracted over opening the agenda. You're talking about the challenge setting.
The challenge
Oversight.
setting, yeah, starting with that in terms of the challenge setting as a governance process. So the kind of things we'd look at there is how is we've already started documenting it in terms of how it's developed. But I'm just asking, is anyone here interested in looking, doing surveys or reports on that? No, I must admit I am. Okay, I am interested in doing that. So maybe I should take ownership of that. But I can start running for that, and then I can just say that and make a note of that and we can move on to the next scoping one. Unless someone has a very great interest in challenge setting, I can move on to the next one. Okay. Okay. Sorry, my computer's just playing up a little bit here. Okay, so what I'm going to look at in terms of challenge setting is this. I'm going to look at how the challenge setting process has been introduced and then try and think of a way that I can survey that. That's all I'm going to do. Moving on to the next one, which is more of a live issue, which is catalyst circle problem sensing. And we have had a request from the community for us to get involved here in two ways. I'll just summarize what they are. The first one is for us to look at removal of a circle representative process. The second one is how effectively is the prioritized problem board working, which I think we were already addressing in our original proposal. To give some background, after town hall last night, there was a breakout room which wanted to discuss, to clarify how a circle representative could be removed, how should they be removed, what that process would look like. I think Tivo and Vanessa were there, and Tivo did a Miro board, and there are some links to the Miro board in the minutes, and also to other reference information like the community moderation guidelines, which is IOG's current code of conduct, and also something called the Catalyst Circle nomination criteria. And the Catalyst Circle nomination criteria provides like a kind of scope for what a rep should do, what their responsibilities should be. And before we get on to discuss this, can I just request that we keep this general about the process and not about individual personalities. But if I like, can open that up to the room. Matthias.
Yeah, so I got approached by finding a solution for this. What I would like to say that whether a Catalyst Circle member is doing their job as outlined in the guidelines or not, they have been elected. So I would advocate for finding a process where varying opinions can be heard and that the parties talk to each other, and ideally find a solution with the help of a third-party neutral. So that's what I'm proposing. My assumption is that if this will fall through, there's a chance. We still need a backup plan, but I would really advocate for finding an amicable solution.
Do you have a suggestion for a third party, Matthias?
Well, yeah, of course I do.
So who might that be?
Yeah, but here's the thing, right? So I got approached actually. So for full transparency to those who don't know, my company actually works on creating a conflict transformation ecosystem, and in line with that is actually a marketplace called Mediators AI, which was a Catalyst Fund 6 proposal within dispute resolution. We're trying to close that out soon. So we are building this, and we are on schedule to launch in April with the MVP. And I understand we want this be released yesterday, essentially. So I got asked, hey, can you mediate this? And I said no, because here's the problem. We as a company, and we have folks that are ADR service providers, mediators, including myself. I think it would be problematic to be our own service provider if we create a marketplace, because that's not what we're for. So I will not engage in this mediation. I am way too close to this whole issue, but I will do my best in finding mediators of high caliber, which I've already done. I mean, this is our whole business model, essentially, that can facilitate such a dialogue if a need arises. That's just one solution. I think there's a lot more other ideas. Okay. Like I said, I'm close to it.
Yeah. There's two things here. I should have said this actually. I suppose we're being asked to, the problem is that can Catalyst Circle develop its own process for getting rid of its own member or one of its own members itself? That's an issue which is kind of a meta issue. So we could look at existing processes and maybe make some suggestions and work with Catalyst Circle on that. And then there's another thing where the community or people in the community want to hold an after town hall next week to discuss a particular deselection. And that's where the mediation might come in. And then the question is, should we get involved in this? That's another question. How should we respond to this? Allison.
Yeah, so first of all, as it relates to kind of addressing the immediate issue at hand, I agree with Matthias 100% that we should push the parties that have the disagreement to talk with each other and have some sort of structured mediation. But leaving aside the immediate issue in front of us, I like the focus on designing a process for this kind of thing to be addressed. And I personally, although I would welcome the rest of the group's feedback, I think it is an appropriate role of the community governance oversight body to be a place for a process overseeing circle members when there's a question about the effectiveness or the conduct of a circle member. And I would like to work on how we formalize that process and publish it to the community and ensure there's consensus for the approach that we're taking, you know, as a longer term, bigger picture strategy. And I would say that the first thing we would potentially need to agree is that a community member with a disagreement or an issue with a circle member could, as step one, petition the community governance oversight group to address as the place to address their concerns. So that would be step one, if we agree that that's within our scope, and I think it is, but I don't think that I mean, I think we need more discussion about that. And then I think we could have step two be, you know, just thinking really high level off the top of my head, step two be that the CGO facilitates a mediation, what that process would look like, we could detail it. And then I think step three, if the mediation doesn't work, is to have a process of putting it back to the community, whether it's some other kind of election or vote, because I don't think, I'm laughing at the, you know, we become the board. I don't think we should do that. But I think what our role could be is to facilitate the process whereby someone who has a complaint or a concern could have a path or a means to resolution or to get the community's feedback in a structured way.
Okay, I'm kind of treating that as an action that you've taken on, Allison. Is anyone else here like to take on that? Work with Allison on doing that? And people have got their hands up as well. And I'll go to Phil first.
I'm sure that's what I said, but okay.
Well, it's kind of, well, unless well, the CTO is about doing things as well, you know. So, you know, so
I'm
really
joking, but yes.
Yeah, okay. But if you object to that, then fine. But the Phil, sorry.
I think it's very interesting that we're starting to look at all these very detailed governance methodologies and stuff. Like we just came from a meeting, Alice and I, about the VCA process and some conflict resolution in that process. But what I'm wondering about is if we as a group start acting, actively being involved with some level of actual governance rather than just observing and reporting on that, then it brings up the question is, who are we? Why are we here? How do we get here? How do we then how does anyone else get to where we are? Although it sort of starts becoming important questions. So I think at this point we're here because we're interested, but going forwards, if we are going to be, if this body is going to be more active, then that conversation is to be had.
Yeah, I agree. And I'll just respond to that. This issue's only arisen because there's a quandary about ownership, because can Catalyst Circle do this themselves if it concerns themselves, I suppose, and that's where we've been brought into that. I agree, we should be very careful. We are oversight, we're not supposed to be implementing anything, okay? At a stretch, we could be facilitating stuff. You know, that's the kind of middle ground, I suppose, or the grey area. Can we facilitate governance processes? Tivo.
Yeah, basically on the same point, that I don't think we should like force or like I want to change the narrative to right now. The way you deselect the nominee is 20 members, and this is also not agreed, and it's like 2 sentences on the whatever the document there is, and we just say, hey, there is an issue here. And we don't even bring in that there is an issue with specific person because he has this and this problem. We just here to why as an oversight there is a need for a process for people to able to like dispute a circle member somehow and make it to go into an action of how to remove or replace him. And yeah, I would actually even argue that we don't want to just remove, we want a process to replace, because else we're just gonna kill the flow in the circle itself. And then also as the oversight, we can, as what you said, facilitate as a gray area to kind of help to bring up these kinds of workshops and places where we do the thinking with the community, then provide the process, give it back to the circle, and they have to implement it. And yeah, now where the mediation, if that's going to come and all of that stuff, that's another story now, which I don't even know how to go into that.
Yeah, I mean, would you like to get it involved in that, Tivo, as well? I suppose. I mean, I suppose
yeah,
we can take some of this offline in the Discord server to have a kind of to see who's doing what rather than do all that here. But it sounds like Matthias, you have some input into this. I know you can't, you know, about the mediation resource, even though that may not be yourself, but you can input into that into Discord. Maybe Allison as well, and Tivo, and Vanessa, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I mean, I was just going to partly reiterate what others have said, that this group should remain as oversight of the governance process. We shouldn't really get involved, I really feel. So it's documenting and watching the process that happens. And I actually think facilitating it is questionable for us as well. I mean, we're all interested in governance, so I think we may get involved as individuals if there is a community process to deal with an issue. But I don't think as CGO we should. I think we can facilitate education in the community to talk about the issues that arise from it, but actually facilitating the process of negotiating about a specific circle member or something, I don't think that's appropriate for us. I mean, for instance, we should be documenting things like this. Process at the moment is supposed to be that 20 people in an after town hall, as Tivo mentioned, can asked to deselect a circle member. Where was that? Where did that come from? How did that come about? Has anybody, you know, where what's the thinking behind that? Would it work? That kind of thing we should be documenting. And mediation, yeah, it's good, but say, for instance, in this specific instance that arose in the after town hall last night, the idea that someone with a specific complaint could talk to the person in circle concerned, it's not really appropriate because there are so many. So I don't see how mediation would work.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of issues there. I kind of, I agree. We shouldn't facilitate a solution ourselves, I suppose. I think what you seem to be saying is that we can facilitate education and communication about where the processes come from. Allison.
Yeah, well, I wanted to really make sure we're all in agreement on the issue that Vanessa raised, because I think there are two different approaches here. One is that we, as CGO, document and make sure things are transparent. And the other is a bit more of an active role, which is what I had laid out, which is not to say that we make decisions, but that we devise a process and serve as a place where community members could petition because we're outside the circle. And I think it's important. I can see the logic in either approach, but I think it's really important before we go any further that we all agree which one we're taking so that we're consistent in how we're acting. Regardless of which approach, I think Phil raised a really important point that we should think about no matter what, which is how did we get to be part of CGO, and do we need to formalize and establish a process for that, regardless of what our role is? Because I think it matters whether we take a pure documentation role or we establish a process that's a bit more of an active role.
Yeah. Phil, would you like to?
I guess I'm kind of imagining I've got the Australian context of what there's a document that's produced from discussions in Parliament called the Hansard, right? So I imagine that's kind of what this group or what this wing of the governance process is essentially looking to produce, right? Like you're kind of doing that already with the QA DAO activities in Circle, right? So what I see, like, we're not community governance, we're community governance oversight, right? So
we are briefed to ask, remember the context, we are briefed to ask questions. It's called surveys, retrospectives and reports, but we can just say, to think of that as asking questions, engaging with the community in workshops and things like that, and then producing a report on what we've found.
Yes. And what I'm actually, that was kind of just a musing that I had while I was listening to Allison, but what I'm actually noticing is that this area needs a very large body of participation beyond the group that we are, who are discussing the functionalities of this, and like with the board, as someone mentioned, of this concept. But right now, like Alice and I just came from the VCA meeting discussing the creation of the VCA guidelines, right? So there's participatory there, there's announcement to bring people in, but it really needs somebody sitting in just looking to output the process, right?
Yeah.
But we don't have resource for that. I'm not going to sit down and now document the process, that because I was involved with it for starters. And so I guess you've modeled the concept, right? The QA DAO modeled the concept of what it is to be oversighting. Yeah.
Well, what QA DAO does, I don't want to bring QA DAO too much into it, because we do a number of things. We don't just do oversight, we kind of do other stuff as well. But just looking at the timing on this, I'm sorry, but we're going to have to, if we go to Joe, Kenrick and Matthias, but bear in mind that we need to arrive at some sort of decision on one, as Allison points out, what are we doing here? Are we just going to, I think it's quite uncontroversial to maybe look at the existing process, which actually, as Tivo pointed out, derives from Governance Alive, and look at that to see if it can be developed a little bit. And we maybe even could develop that ourselves. And the other thing is, there's actually, we've actually been asked, I suppose, to facilitate a meeting next town hall. And listening to what people are saying here, I'm not sure if that's appropriate. So maybe we can address that as well. Joe.
I'm keen to stay on the documenting side of this rather than becoming a board in any way, shape or form. Having said that, put a pin in, maybe there does need to be an elected body that is an ultimate, right? But that's something that really needs to come from the community. rather than from IOG saying, you know, we think you need an oversight of us and everybody else. You know, like how this came about is a, you know, is an instigated thing. Secondly, I mean, it is resource intensive, but maybe it is straightforward to be, you know, in the process observing and then writing it up and then presenting it to the community in a survey. This is what happened, your thoughts, you know, really carefully structured, and then an open field for them to add in more. Like, I mean, that's, you know, there's a process for us that kind of goes along with the brief that we've got. I think that's my thoughts.
Do you have a thought on the decision about whether we should attend?
I
Whether we should facilitate or
somebody.
Go on.
I think we should attend, but not facilitate in any way, shape, or form.
Okay, great.
It's oversight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and for this meeting, it does feel like we're getting a little bit too focused on one issue.
Yeah, that's why we
I
should
kind of
wrap up.
support you, Steve, in terms of the time.
Yeah.
We probably need to move on.
Yeah. So, yeah, Matthias, you can just address that, and then we just wrap up and go on to the next issue here.
Yes. So I think the main difference actually for me between governance oversight and audit circle is audit circle purely documents primarily, and surveys and documents of current processes. And for me, what I posted earlier in the chat, is it kind of our role a little bit like a board of the catalyst circle? Ideally, it's not, if they can take care of themselves. But if it's not, I would actually not totally put it out of the question that we can raise and with community input come up with processes that essentially replace circle members, for example, since we're on the topic.
I think we have to take. I think we're going to have to take some of that conversation offline.
Yeah.
The basic decision, it sounds like, for the immediate decision is that I'm getting from the group contradicting me, is that we should not facilitate. We should just go and observe. Yeah. Okay. And we don't have really time to, in fairness to the other items, we don't really have time to address the other circle issue, which is more in the original proposal, which is to oversee how effective the prioritized problems board is working. I suggest we table that to the next meeting, if everyone agrees, and we move on to DREPs.
Yeah.
And oversight of DREPs. And maybe Kenrick, you'd like to talk about this a little bit.
Yeah, sure. So what I suggested to Steve and kind of have tentative agreement on, and like to hear response from others, is I plan to kind of dig into putting together a literature review on the topic of liquid democracy, and then I took sort of the opposing words of that, illiquid plutocracy, as a way to kind of frame what these terms mean and how you would measure an outcome in this area. So as a first step, I've set up a Zotero bibliography with some groups. For now, I made it by invitation. There is an option to just make it completely public, but I'm not sure that's the best way to handle it right now. So if you want to participate in that bibliography or use the resources, please send me a Slack message, or I suppose a Discord message with an email address, and I can add you. And, just as an example, well, I've also started the groups I've started with liquid democracy, enterprise governance. The phrase corporate governance was already taken, which is what I was planning. And then DAO governance and centralized plutocracy. We can add more groups to that bibliography. And as an example, I'm reading through a paper right now called Power in Liquid Democracy, which is intended to provide some analytical tools about how you measure the distribution of power in this kind of a system and what its dynamics are. So those are the, and then just to wrap up, the purpose of the literature review is to then facilitate a more, you know, a conversation with the IOG teams that are working on the design process for the delegated rep structure that they're proposing. And so I'd like that to be a more informed conversation. And as a way to facilitate that, I'm putting this bibliography together.
Yeah, that's great. And if I can just ask people for two things. Would you support some allocation of budget for this? I know we don't have a great deal to, you know, for this, but we're putting more in the next Fund 8 budget. We do have something. We could take some money from the survey portion for this. And also, does anyone have any comments or feedback for Kenrick? It's very quiet.
I saw a thumbs up from Allison, which I
Yeah.
appreciate.
I was going to type in the chat, but since no one else is talking, I'm all for reallocating budget from surveys, which I'm skeptical of to begin with, to research. I think that's a productive use of resources.
Are you looking for funding in Fund 8 for this as well, Kenrick?
Yes, I worked with Steve on the proposal for that. And for Fund 8, we're proposing a white paper on this topic. And
Okay.
so this literature review will feed into the work under Fund 8, you know, if we get that.
So it'd be like preparation, Phil. So the only other aspect of DREPs is we are already keeping track and documenting oversight of what's happened so far. There's a section in our Git book that covers that. Maybe a portion of budget will go to that, but I think most of the budget should go towards Matthias. Sorry, what Kenrick is doing. If there's not any other comments on DREPs, maybe we should move on to the last part of our scope, which is governance parameters. Allison, would you like to speak to this a little bit? Because
Sorry, could I just quickly come in there? I'm noticing that we have had a bit of bringing the circle stuff in. We've creeped our scope a little bit from the very limited scope that this Fund 7 proposal had. So I just wanted to make note of that. That's
scope was originally on challenge setting, prioritize circle prioritized problems, and parameter changes. The only thing that we've added is DREPs.
okay. I guess what I was leading to say is that if we look at a specific, like we discussed last time, one or maybe two very specific outputs as a test case of what this oversight would look like, rather than each period bringing in new various issues that are happening in the community. We need to identify that that's happening, but we as a group need, for Fund 7 at least, need to have a specific output in 3 months' time that is a report about something.
Yeah, I would remind everyone that everything we're working toward, everything we're doing now, and I know this is kind of emerging, we are trying to provide a context, Phil, but obviously these things change in action. Sure. But the overall deliverable is a report. Okay, so everything has to come together for this proposal, whatever we're doing in that. You're right, we did discuss last time, I mean, we had a big discussion last time about scope in general and how we should approach things. And the last discussion focused on prioritized problems, maybe, and looking at that as maybe a model for an approach. What's changed since then? Maybe Allison, you'd like to talk about.
Well, yeah, I was going to say I've changed my view on what our scope is. Last time we met, I thought we should focus narrowly on the governance parameters pilot because there was a very defined role for this group, and surveying and feedbacking and slotting into that process flow that IOG had laid out what's caused me to change my mind is that that's not happening. And so in the absence of having that more specific focus, I think it does make sense to return to actually what was, as Stephen was pointing out, the original focus of the proposal, which was oversight of everything governance related, challenge teams, circle prioritize problems,
DREPs.
governance parameters. Yeah, DREPs wasn't in the proposal, but it fits into the general governance oversight. And I think it also, I think what our scope is directly relates to how actively we get involved. Because if we're focused more on documentation and ensuring transparency, the updates that we gave in the town hall around what had happened with each of those governance processes and issues and people and experiments is feasible to do for all of these different areas. If we're doing something much more involved, like designing a process for the community to petition when they have concerns about a circle member, that's a much bigger task in and of itself and would require a narrower focus. But I think if our focus really is on documentation and ensuring transparency, then it's very feasible to do that for all of the different governance areas.
Yeah. So recall what IOG initially wanted us to do was to take a governance process, and they originally had those three in mind: challenge settings, prioritize problems, and the catalyst circle prioritize problems board, and the parameter changes, and to intervene at discrete parts of the process, each of those processes, to do surveys to say, how is it going for you? How is it going for the community? And to facilitate some feedback after that sometime, and then finally to do a final report. What seems to be emerging here, what we decided in what as last time was to focus on one area. That's kind of been disrupted by the fact that that one area has been put on hold by IOG. So we have nothing to do if we did that, apart from just documenting the fact it's on hold. So all we can do is go back to the individual. Sorry, I didn't notice you had your hand up there, Phil. So if you'd like to respond to that as well.
No, I was just trying. I was wondering. So I'm involved with this VCA process. I don't really want to sit down and write a whole report about what we did in this process because the document exists.
Yeah.
I'm wondering like how.
Or if it was about the VCA process, you wouldn't be doing that. Well, for one, we're not overseeing that at the moment. We could be, but that's. But
I kind of see that as like I'm here on this body.
Yeah.
And I'm actively participating in the process.
Yeah.
But at the same time, oversighting to make sure that the process exists in a broader scheme of this is part of governance, right? Because we're putting in I think it's a role in there. So
I think it's valid. I mean, if anything, that's missing, isn't it? The CA process is a major governance process.
Yes.
But if we were going to oversee that, we wouldn't be duplicating any of the work that, for example, Nadia does or the VCA working parties do or whatever. All we'd be doing is going and asking them questions about how effectively it's working at best. That's, would you say, Phil?
Yes, but I'm actually actively running it with Nadia. So
yeah, so there's maybe a conflict of interest there, or I'm not sure what you think about that.
And I guess that's like, I could imagine an output I could make is a report from an oversight point of view of the process that we undertook, but it's a very resource intensive activity to do that. And I'm wondering if there's any value in doing something like that for the various aspects that we're going across.
If I could respond, because what I was going to suggest with what the issues Phil's going to is that maybe we could segue to the next item on your agenda, governance parameters, and talk a little bit about why IOG has put the oversight of governance parameters by the circle on hold, And in lieu of that, how our update, I gather then that any changes to the parameters are going to be continue to be managed by IOG directly. And is there an explanation about that? And then, in a sense, that's where I think
Yes.
some of Phil's questions come in, is sort of what's the scope now of overseeing governance parameters and
That's very specific.
and processes like, and that would include processes like the CEA process and the VCA process.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, just to break that up, the thing that we were going to address, I mean, by we, I mean our proposal was going to address the parameters pilot, so something very specific, which Harris was working on. He had developed some workflows, if you recall, as late as December, January. And then at the last circle meeting, Harris said it's all on hold. You're right, Kenrick, there's some more questions that raises, like, why is it on hold? and why are you telling us now? That kind of thing. But they're gone.
I think the loss of Philip really threw them out a lot, because he was managing a lot of that process.
Right.
Is my understanding. So
Okay.
The loss of who?
Phil
Philip,
Chang.
yeah, he passed away a few months over January period, I think. So
I saw that, but I didn't know him or realize he was involved.
yeah, he wasn't too involved with the community, but he was managing a lot of the processes, as far as I know.
It was like Voltaire governance, and probably related to like writing the first version of one.
Yeah, it's very sad. Like, I had a preliminary meeting with him, but back in November, and also after the summit. But yeah, sadly, he's no longer with us. And I'm not sure, I mean, how far we want to dig into that. There is a general issue of our relationship with IOG and how they communicate with us over governance changes, but I'm not sure we can address that right now. Allison, you have it.
Yeah, I was going to say briefly for the record, I mentioned this offline, but since it's an agenda meeting, I did send Harris 2 emails specifically regarding the governance parameters scope and where IOG stood on that vis-a-vis this group's action, and I did not receive any response.
Yeah.
So just to document that.
Okay. Also, Tivo, you spoke to Marek about this.
Yes.
And what did Marek say?
So related to DREPs, nothing, but related to catalyst parameters, he mentioned that yes, last month Harris wanted him to create a list of catalyst parameters, basically, which could be edited and changed. But one thing what he mentioned, because then I started like, oh, I assume that all of these things we just went through, because I showed the product of Catalyst basically on the templates. And he's like, no, nothing, no about the timelines or changes. The only parameters he was supposed to like list and is the how much a person should get funding, the percent allocation. When you have like 60 million now, how many percent will go to CAs, how many to VCAs, how many to challenge teams, and if there should be more roles, for example, circle admin. And these were the parameters what he kind of made me understand that these are the parameters what we're talking about.
Fund apportionment, so to roles and to.
And honestly, that's a good one to focus on. And that's why I'm wondering if maybe, even though there's some sort of it sounds to me like some short-term issues with regard to progress on this, maybe that doesn't need to slow down our efforts to get community input, particularly the issue about financial support for the administrators of the circle, I think is a pretty big, important, relevant issue. And if we as a group could help the community make some progress on that, I think that would be of value to everyone, including IOG.
How do you think we should approach that, Kenrick? Should we just take that
Well, my
observation?
own thought is that it would be, you know, you're talking about surveys with the community, so I think that would definitely be an important part of it. But then when you have some input, then you lay out recommendations based on that input. And of course, that doesn't make it policy, but it's just provides some guidance on the potential policy.
But we need something to base that survey on. So we would say, okay, what if this parameter? Yeah, go on.
Base it on the current allocation of roles within the community, you know, putting aside, well, you don't even have to put aside, but in other words, what's the current percentage? Well, this is even a question, like, maybe this is also just educating the community about these parameters, right? Because, for instance, I'm assuming, but now that I say it, I'm probably incorrect even. How are these parameters currently set between allocating for proposal funding, CA, VCA process?
Do you want me to answer right away?
What's that?
Do you want me to answer right away?
No, I don't think the answer, I mean, in other words, in a short meeting, the specific answer isn't relevant.
Yeah.
The point is to document it and then get some community input about whether this is the way the community feels it should be. And then provide some recommendations if any changes to that.
As it is a short meeting, can I suggest that because Tiva, you've created a snapshot there. If we can start with a snapshot, that maybe that's a good place to start, Kenrick, is to say, and then we can address that offline and then maybe return to it as the next bi-weekly meeting to say, okay, basically ask that question, what are the parameters that are in place at the moment? Yeah. So that we have a baseline. And then from there, to return to the question of what should we survey? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I'd just like to make a quick comment about why IOG might be asking for surveys, because that it helps them run and make decision making, right? It doesn't necessarily help the community at this point because we don't have the decision making power in a lot of the points. So information helps make decisions. So when we were running the voter survey, that was part of the point, that how can we improve the proposal process through feedback from the end user, which is the voter, and pass that information back to the proposals so that they can make better decisions. So I'm pretty sure that's why IOG is asking for the surveys, right?
Yeah, but recall, this isn't the framework that we inherited does come from IOG, but also part of this whole thing is to transition from IOG.
Yes, but you need information to make good decisions. So as the decision makers, the IOG wants the information, but as the future decision makers, the community needs the information.
Yeah, so effectively what we're trying to do is to replace that part of IOG that oversees its governance changes. That's what we're about. Now, we obviously need a lot of work to get there.
Yes.
But we're starting, and of course we're overlapping, aren't we, with IOG here in terms of how it's using some of its methods,
Yeah, and then we can iterate on them. That's the Catalyst way, right?
Okay, I'll try and capture those as take a snapshot of the parameters as they stand with a view to, at the next meeting, looking at how we could survey that in terms of what could be changed and what's wrong, or the pros and cons with the current apportion of funds, that kind of thing. And if we can move on, because now we're sort of like wrapping the meeting up, I'll go back to a screen share and it's more sort of semi-administrative stuff, but on just to keep you aware of what's happening. So thank you for that discussion, everyone. Fund 7 proposal reporting is due today. I've already done the report for our proposal. And there's a link. I've transcribed it and put it into the Git book so everyone can read it. The only thing that's of major interest is that I did identify that the project was not on track because one of our core scopes is on hold. In other words, the parameter change is on hold. So that's been reported back to IAG as a blocker. So that's been done today. There's a section we didn't really address too much last time, which was how we outreach to different language communities. I'm afraid I forgot to put this in the Fund 8 proposal, sorry, but we could maybe still address this issue by getting funds from somewhere else or partnering or collaborating with other translation proposals. In other words, to take what we're doing here to translate it and to evangelize about it, if you like, in different parts of the world. So I mean, we just need to address this at some point. In any other business, I'll just quickly summarize that, Allison referred to the secretary role, so we've already covered that. I've added a budget line in the Fund 8 proposal that specifically resources project management and administration. So if we get funded again, we'll have $500 per month to spend on administration and project management. If anyone wants to do any GitHub training, I'm sending, this is an offer here. Again, if you take that offline and say, if you want to contact me, we could arrange a session to go over, because I created a project board for this project using beta features, which is, but I won't go over it here. That's for another time. And as we're in any other business, we're on the hour, but does anyone have any other business at all I'd like to raise?
Yeah, I have a quick question.
Yeah, sure.
Do we owe a formal response regarding what we are and are not doing in next week's town hall? And if so, who's taking that action item? Or is there nothing more we need to do?
I can respond directly. I suppose the point of contact we have is Felix. I could respond directly to Felix. My conclusion from this meeting is that we will not be facilitating that. Is that right?
I would add that if any individual wants to do the facilitation, that would work.
Yeah, sure.
But not as a representative of the community government oversight.
Yeah, I agree.
Yep. So
we can attend as individuals.
Yep.
But CTO won't facilitate it.
And I would add that we should certainly continue doing our part to document the situation and keep the community apprised of what's going on.
I agree. I sort of think maybe it'd be useful to know if there's anybody here who intends to go purely to document, because I think some of us here might intend to go as individuals. I mean, I'm happy to go and document.
Okay, can we put that as an action then, Vanessa, to document? Yeah, okay. And I may attend as an individual. I think Felix would appreciate the clarity. I'm going to be just straight with him saying we're not going to do that. Because I think it's too, well, we've already discussed it anyway. So is there any other items that people would like to raise at all? Or feedback as well?
Maybe related to what you just said, I forgot to mention because we didn't have time. Well, not forgot, but well, the person we have the issue is, as understood, is Dimitri, and now he's also banned from all the Discord channels, and we have removed some of the outreach possibility from him, even though he has it. Like,
if I could ask not to discuss individuals, sorry.
Okay.
Yeah,
I just thought maybe you want to know.
Yeah, no, but yeah, if I ask people not to discuss individuals, I can close the meeting here, or if there's any feedback, if I could have some brief feedback on what I did with the screen share at the beginning, if the people like that, I can continue to do that at the next meeting.
You know what was confusing? When
sorry.
you stopped the screen share, then I was like, oh, damn it, I went to Discord and look up for the document.
Ah, right. I mean, the reason why I did that, because I've had feedback that some people don't like screen share, some people do. So I thought I'd just share the screen when it comes to like very administrative stuff so people can see what's going on. And then when it comes to a more general discussion, people have said that they like seeing each other's faces.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. And I'll just say as general feedback, Stephen, I think you're doing an amazing job of organizing and facilitating this group and keeping us
Yeah,
going in the
thanks
right
for putting it
direction. Thank
together.
you.
Okay, thank you, Allison. Thank you, everyone. For the recording post, I'll stop the recording now so we can have a more informal discussion. I'll thank you, everyone, for participating and attending today.